Money is a center of a lot of judgment, a lot of self-judgment, a lot of judgment of others, a lot of worth stuff, a lot of value stuff. And because it's all an internal game, a lot of people don't know that, right? So the only way we can get this energy out that's not conscious is to place judgment on others and how they are using money, how they're circulating their money, how they're choosing to exercise their wealth.
Welcome back to another episode of It Takes Grit. I'm fired up today because I am joined by Christine, who we just gelled. The other day we had a phone call and I'm like, I need more of this person in my life. And I was like, so my audience need more of you in their life. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
And it's the 4th of July as well that we're recording this on. So things are about to get a little bit crazy after the call. So we thought we'd do some business because no one ever works on the 4th of July, ever.
Mm-hmm. Except us.
Exactly. That's why I wanted to check with you. I was like, are you sure about doing this podcast? You're like, oh yes, 100%.
Yeah. Got the husband taking care of the kids. And really, is this work getting to have an incredible conversation with you, who I find so inspirational? That's not work. That's fun. That's play.
That's so true. I love it. Cool. Well, we really gelled because we had a common bond about talking about money. But first of all, I want you to just go for it. Pretend that there's no ego. I want you to tell everybody how freaking unbelievable and badass you are, because you're going to make me look really cool. So tell everybody who you are and what it is that you do.
Okay, who am I? I am a coach. I'm a coach of executives and visionaries and high net worth individuals. What have I done and why am I badass? I am pretty badass, actually. I spent several years in intelligence, learning about hostage negotiation, counterintelligence, counterterrorism, lived in Dubai, I lived in Montreal, I lived in Ecuador, I lived in Sydney, I lived in LA, and then I lived on an airplane when I was working for a billionaire. And one of the reasons this billionaire hired me is so that I could be a fly on the wall in plain sight in these super high stakes negotiations and mutually beneficial partnerships kind of search. So I would be there analyzing the body language of all of the people in the room to determine basically what their psychological state was, and to determine if we wanted to move forward with them. And so I was doing intelligence reporting on all of these people. I knew the names of their dogs before they even met us. So it was a very interesting time. We were in the room with Prince Albert of Monaco, advising him on how to make Monaco the world's first carbon negative country. We went sailing with Guy Laliberté, the founder of Cirque du Soleil. We met with Peter Diamandis in Silicon Valley to talk about making an X Prize for Formula E. We've just, like, the people that I've been lucky enough to do business with, I've just learned so many lessons from about what it means to move through the world in a generative way, what it means to move through the world and create connection, both from a human perspective and from a business perspective, and how that all rolls up into being the most ideal experience for everyone involved.
That's so freaking badass. Like, I imagine you like in this plane, like suited, just like looking so fly and just being like, I'm owning this right now.
Yeah. Yes.
And you really had to step into that greatness was there times where you like, am I good enough for this? Because that's a very high profile powered job. Was there times where you like, am I cut out for this?
Every day. I mean, I wouldn't even talk about what I was doing and who I was meeting, because there was such a big part of me that didn't feel like I was good enough, didn't feel relevant. I didn't feel, it was a fear. Here's an interesting thing. So I thought that I was being humble by not like talking about all of these incredible successes. Like, I don't want to throw it in people's faces. I don't want them to feel bad about, if they're not doing similar things. But really, it was a fear of judgment and what that would mean about me and what that would mean about my relationships. And so I played small for a long, long, long time, a long time. And I was the youngest person in the room by at least 15 years, most of the time, usually the only woman. People would always assume I was someone's assistant.
Or someone's piece on the side.
Yes. Oh, totally. So I'd be at this table and no one would make eye contact with me, which, you know, given that I was there to study everyone, it kind of worked, but also that played into that story of I don't deserve to be here. No one even knows my name. No one cares about knowing me because they all think that, you know, it's like the classic imposter syndrome, that story was being confirmed every time I walked into a room and no one would care to understand why I was there.
I think that's so interesting because everybody at every single level feels like they don't belong, feels like they're out of their place. So you might look at like celebrities or singers or actors or whatever, and everybody as a place where they're like, oh my goodness, like, do I belong here? Like, am I just like punching above my own weight? And I was just in Monaco. It's funny that you're talking about that. And I'm surrounded by these entrepreneurs. I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, how did I get here? Like, do I deserve it? And I feel that every single level that we're at in life, we all have those feelings. And so now I feel like you're really coming into your own and you're owning that. And a lot of my audience might be feeling right now that they want to start something new, that they feel like they're being judged. How did you get over that so that you could share what you do with other people and just own who you are?
How did I get over it? I had to do, well, and I'm still doing this work. I think I'm not sure what it looks like to be done doing this work. I think that it continues to manifest in layers and levels as we get bigger and bigger. Like there's always kind of another piece, another way to orient ourselves within the matrix of success and being visible. But the thing that I did the most, I'd say the thing that helped me the most is I started to feel this tension and this discomfort with the fact that I didn't really know who I was. And I know that sounds so like existential crisis zone. But I really started to question, like, what am I doing here? Like, I had placed a lot of my self-value on my accomplishments. And I found that in order to introduce myself, I would list out things that I had done that were outward versions of success. And I was hanging my hat on that. And therefore, without the ability to list my accomplishments, I felt completely out of my depth. So I started to realize I've got to figure out who I am and why I love myself just as a human being and live from that place instead of having to constantly validate myself. So I did a lot of work in self-awareness. I did a lot of work in trying to understand what my base fears were. I realized that this was several years ago. One of my base fears was being irrelevant. And of course, that was playing out in several stages. And here's the interesting thing. I tried and proved and tried and proved and proved. And nothing shifted in terms of me feeling that way until I did the work to decide I am relevant already, no matter what any of these people think. I am relevant already. And as soon as I made that shift mentally, nothing changed. The mental shift, people started to respond to me totally differently. So it had to do with my work and elevating my self-awareness, first of my fears, then counteracting my fears with a positive opposite affirmation and saying it enough and writing about it enough and doing contemplation enough to believe it and then figure out how to walk through the world in that way.
Right. So the first thing you did is you decided that you needed to make a change because all of these other things were making you feel like you needed them rather than just like having yourself. And then to get over that, it was, well, owning up to it. Like that's how you felt. And then second of all, it's writing things down and then affirmations. So they're the thing like daily gratitude, daily affirmations. Is that what you were doing to kind of retrain your brain?
Yes. Yeah. I would write, like if for example, my base fear was being irrelevant and that perpetuation was making me feel small and stay small. So I am relevant, positive opposite of irrelevant. And then I would write myself a letter, why all the reasons I'm relevant, that was not based on anything outside of myself. So I would like write myself these letters from myself.
Right. So what
And
things were they? What were you writing down that was making you feel relevant as yourself?
I was doing a gratitude practice. That's how I initiated this. And I was almost writing in third person from myself to myself. You are relevant. And the reasons I know this are like, I talked about my dog. Your dog loves you so much and does not care about the fact that you did or did not study in the Middle East. You know, your dog loves you for you. And it sounds so corny, but truly simplifying it down to these elemental truths really captured. It was almost like being relevant without a reason, you know, being happy without a reason, because none of those things could be taken away.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And then it's having that balance too, to be like, I'm good enough as I am. And also I do want to do all these other things too. So do you think that being happy in yourself actually helped you in the other areas because you had like less pressure, or like you were just able to perform better?
Mm-hmm. Oh yes. It started there. Everything accelerated in my life when I decided that I was already the things that I sought. I was already all of the iterations of myself that I thought I was, that I thought was a goal. I made it true today and figured out why that happened. And then everything, the world, it was like the external world responded to that. And I was able to step up and step in ways where before I was scared to do that. And it was almost like I cultivated this confidence. And then the success started to accelerate. It was two things though. I had to decide these things, and then I had to be in action around those things. It was almost like I decided it and made it true, and then created experimentation and action in the world to test these theories out. And the more I lived it, then I had evidence that it was true. And then it was, but it had to be true here first. You know, it's kind of a little bit of a chicken and an egg thing. But
do you feel like you were being more authentic as yourself, and then that's what kind of helped you? That's what it kind of sounds like to me. It's like, hey, you found yourself. You're like, I'm being authentic. I don't need to prove anything to anybody. And therefore, I'm being better perceived in the world.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. That's so cool. That's so rad. And that's such a big thing about so many people who don't feel like enough. Like for me, I grew up, my parents are so supportive in everything, but I just always wanted to make them proud for no reason, like whatsoever, that they put any pressure on me. But it was like such a burning desire to like make them proud. And I remember I got dropped from the South of England field hockey team, and I had to go and face my parents. And it was like the worst moment of my life, because I was so traumatized that I got dropped. Not that they even cared, but it was like I wasn't good enough. And it's crazy, because we are all good enough exactly where we are, and we just have to keep pursuing where we want to go.
Yes. Yes. I think a lot of people get into this perpetual trap of, it's almost like a mental construct. If we convince ourselves that where we are right now is not good enough, then we're always in motion. You know, we're always in motion trying to get to another place. But it's interesting, because then it becomes a mental state. It becomes a way of being, and we train our bodies and we train our biochemical processes to support this perpetual seeking, the perpetual state of thinking that something is outside of ourselves that we need to go and achieve or get in order to be happy with ourselves. And then the trap happens when you get to the thing, you create the achievement, you get to the place. But I don't know how many people have experienced this, or if you've experienced this. I definitely have, where I get the thing, and then because it's a mental construct, I don't even really notice that I've gotten the thing, and I'm already looking somewhere else.
You don't feel it. You're ready to feel something. I remember like when my new app came out, and it was like the build up, and it came up, and I was like, oh, well, then we're going to do this next. And I didn't feel it.
Yeah.
It was almost the build up to it, because you would then focus, right, now that job is done, okay, what's the next thing? And it's about like really taking ownership of those moments that you have been successful, and you're like, wow, it's taking that step back to kind of look at yourself and to be like, good job, you know, good job,
Yes.
Rebecca, like, good job, Christine, like, you did it. Okay.
Yes.
Cool. So one thing I really wanted to talk to you about today was the money thing. So there is a big kind of like sticky thing about people talking about money. And I grew up, my dad didn't particularly like me talking about money, even though as I'm starting to show him my success, it kind of made him feel uncomfortable. I've even been asked in like situations, hey, like, don't talk about money. And to me, I'm like, I find it a very fascinating thing, because I want to learn, like, you know, where money's going. And if you earn more money, you can do better things with it. You know, if all the good people in the world had all the money, we would be in a much better place. So what's your experience been like with this, you know, sticky situation with females around money?
Yes. Females around money. Oh my goodness. This is such a universe. This is such a universe of things. My experience with myself, I'll speak for myself, is I would always talk about my value, self-value, my self-worth, and trying to cultivate that. And it never quite felt right. And I would, and when I was doing that work, when I was constantly trying to equate my value with monetary means and the numbers in the bank account, or even what I was offering in terms of business ventures, it never sat right. And then someone told me this one time. Who was that? Because I want to give them credit. I'll come back to that, because it was someone. They said, the reason it doesn't feel right to say that is because we are priceless. You are priceless. We are all priceless. And to talk about our value, it doesn't align, because it's not true that we have any value, because we have no value because we're priceless, right? And there's a lot of literature, and there's a lot of coaches that talk about own your value, claim your value. And so I made a big shift when I switched off of talking about my value, particularly when I was offering a service to someone, and switched it. It's a tiny change, but it makes all the difference, from the value of me to the value of my services, the value of my offerings. And the second I took that off, it was like I was able to disentangle my self-worth from money, because they are different, you know, and then own in a totally different way the value of my services, because then that was unlimited.
Right. So
does that make sense?
Yeah, that's such a huge switch, because you're not talking about how much you're worth. You're just talking about how much the service of what you're offering. And that doesn't define you, because there's so many different parts of you. This is just one aspect of me that I'm able to help you with.
Yes. And it's why I couldn't answer the question for the longest time. What am I worth? What am I worth? What should I charge? Yeah. I was stuck for so long, you know, because no one can answer that question, really.
It really, and how did you answer the fact of how much are you worth per your service? Did you go off what other people were doing? Did you feel like this was just what was right for you? Like, because I've had that question too, like, how much do you charge for things that you're doing? I mean, it's just like, it depends how much someone's willing to pay you, right?
Right. Yes. I think the big secret is that it's completely arbitrary. I once had someone tell me, particularly with coaching, you know, this is kind of before I made that shift. And I was like, how do I decide what to charge? And she said, you charge whatever number you can get to come out of your mouth. And I was like, wait, what? That doesn't answer my question, you know? But now it does make sense, because I think that what do you charge? What's the value of your services? It is arbitrary, and it can be different throughout the trajectory of life. It has to be true internally, and I have to believe it about my service. before I say it out loud to someone else. And then that is doing the work of raising self-awareness and owning how awesome I am, basically, and looking at the results that people were getting from working with me, even if I was working with someone for free when I first started coaching. Like, I was coaching for free just to kind of get that experience, and people were having incredible results. So, you know, what's it worth? What's a flash of insight worth?
Mm-hmm.
It is priceless. So it's, again, like, it could be any number. Any number.
It really is. It's what aligned with what you feel, isn't it? And at the beginning, we all do stuff for free. I think that's like the biggest thing. And maybe like the new millennials coming through right now, they're like, well, I want to go and get a job. You've got to do, I have done so much stuff for free just to get it on my resume, to get experience, because if you want to go and work in a certain place, that experience is actually invaluable. Like getting the experience rather than just getting a paycheck, going to have experience, work experience at somewhere that you want to ultimately work at, is better to do that for free than to work at some place that you don't really love and it's not what your vision is, just for money. Because I feel like at the moment, a lot of people think, well, I need to make money, like I deserve money for this. Whereas at the beginning, you can't, I don't feel like you can expect anything.
That, I love that you said that, because yes, I completely agree. I would often tell, so I was senior vice president for this billionaire. It was a family office, and I worked directly with the chief investment officer. And something that was really interesting is the way the exchange rates worked, and the fact that I was paying, 35% US taxes on everything that I was making. And I wasn't expensing travel or anything, just because I don't even know why. I didn't know to ask that question. I didn't know to be like, hey, can someone cover my meals because I'm traveling for you? I just didn't know. So I really was not making that much money. I mean, I was covering rent and living expenses, but not really making enough to put away. And it didn't even matter. And I think also with some investments that I made on behalf of the company, I was in the red in terms of like overall how much money I made during that experience. And I tell Robbie all the time, I'm happy about that. Like, I would have paid you money to do this job because the experience was invaluable. The fact that I can reference the people I can reference, the fact that I got to travel the world, the fact that I got to stay in these beautiful places. I mean, I absolutely would have paid for that.
And it's like it's school. If you go to school for 4 years, university, you pay for that. I would actually argue, hey, take that money and pay to go and work for somebody. Yeah, pay them. Yes, I'm going to say that. Pay them to work for them so that you can get the experience, because the experience is way more valuable and you become more valuable than just having a degree like next to your name.
Yes, absolutely. And this is another interesting thing about money is when you are, money is an energy. We always used to talk about that in the investment world. And when someone is choosing to put forth energy in the form of money and exchange it away from themselves and place it somewhere, you are going to get so much more value and experience out of that. You're going to pay attention. You are going to take notes in a way that maybe you wouldn't if you were being paid for the experience, or if there was no value exchange at all. It is an investment in yourself. And to circulate money in that way, it creates the opportunity for you to expand in that, rather than just have it be a transaction.
Right. And I feel like people get a little bit icky when it comes to expensive things with money. My mum went into a Louis Vuitton store 8 years ago, and she wanted to go and buy this bag. Now, I did not grow up with Louis Vuitton, like nothing. Like, I didn't even know what it was, right? It's not like I grew up with Kale Smoothies, Louis Vuitton, and like Christian shit. My mum had done some extra work she's a school teacher. So she'd done some extra, supply work, and she'd saved up her money to go into a Louis Vuitton store in England and buy this particular bag. Now, Louis Vuitton increases their prices like every year. She went in to buy this bag, and it was $50 more than it was. And she went to buy it, and she didn't have enough money because the price had gone up. And the guy said to her, well, if you can't afford it, you can't afford it, or something like that, that made her cry, and she left the store. And I was fuming. I called up Louis Vuitton. I was like, you know, this is not how you treat people. My mum saved for ages. Anyway, this blooming bag has been in our group chat, for our family group chat, for 8 years. And she kept posting about it. Every time that she would go to the airport, she, you know, because there's like duty free, she would text us, and it just kept going up. The price had gone up in 8 years, like, I don't know, like another $600 or something crazy. And last year I surprised her with the bag, and it was the best moment ever. Like, she's crying, I'm crying. And it wasn't about the cost of the bag. It was about the experience and being able to give my mum that. And I was sharing this exact story. And, you know, most people are like, oh my God, wow, that's amazing. Well, somebody turned around and said, even if I had all the money in the world, I wouldn't spend it on Louis Vuitton. And I just thought, did you not? That wasn't the point of the story. And at the end of the day, that person is getting paid well to make a Louis Vuitton bag rather than going to somewhere like Target. Mm-hmm. And so people are like, oh, it's so expensive. Well, what about the person who's actually making the bag? They're getting paid a lot more money than somebody who went to like, you know, just a supermarket or something. So in that instance, I was so shocked. I was like, I can't believe this. I was like, have you not just heard the story about my mom with the whole, like 8 years in the making, Virginia. This is 8 years in the making. But how do you get over that with people thinking, well, that's really expensive. You know, why would you spend your money on that? I just feel that the person has actually put effort and time, and they deserve that money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The interesting thing about money and wealth and expensive things, I mean, everything's relative, right? Like expensive. What is expensive? It's kind of like, if on a continuum of hot to cold, at what point can you say for sure that cold becomes hot? You can't. It's all just one big experience of temperature that feels different when you're experiencing it differently. I think expensive is kind of the same thing. Same thing with success and failure. It's all the same continuum. It's just how you experience it. So how to be with that? I have to go back to the elemental understanding that money is a center of a lot of judgment, a lot of self-judgment, a lot of judgment of others, a lot of worth stuff, a lot of value stuff. And because it's all an internal game, a lot of people don't know that, right? So the only way we can get this energy out that's not conscious is to place judgment on others and how they are using money, how they're circulating their money, how they're choosing to exercise their wealth. So that's how I reconcile with that. I just say everybody's on their journey in a different place, and their projection on someone, especially if it's negative or like guilt ridden and all of that stuff, I just kind of let that go right by me.
Just brushed it off the shoulder.
Yeah.
I think I was so flabbergasted at the comment. I was like, I don't even know what to say here. This fits me perfectly in what you talk about in, you know, your favorite way to think about challenges. Because every single day we all face challenges, and it's that same spectrum that you were talking about, which I love, that it's the hot and the cold, where everybody's challenges are relative to where they are. But if I feel like sometimes I'm just putting out fires all day. Like, that's my job. Like, I wake up, I'm like, something's broken, something's going on, putting out those fires. And I used to get so emotional about it. My reactions, I would just fly off the handle. And I've really learned now that if I allow that to happen, I'm bursting energy balloons, and I'm just not going to be very productive for the rest of the day. But how do you deal with the challenges? I mean, you're in super high situations with billionaires, and there's a lot of money at stake. So how does that differ for you?
Yes. So challenges are one of my favorite things to discuss, because I truly believe that within every challenge there is an opportunity, and within every challenge there is a gift. I have so often heard people say the worst thing that ever happened to me was also the best thing. I just couldn't see it at the time. I had to wait to see it later. So an exercise that I like to do with myself is collapsing the time. between the challenge and understanding where the gift for me is. And, you know, it could take me a year, and I could spend a year being pissed off or, you know, angry or victimizing myself. Or I can know that that's eventually going to be the result, and I'm going to feel great about whatever happened, however it happened, take responsibility for it, take ownership of it. So instead of waiting a year, I just wait 5 minutes or 1 minute. I process it real time. And a way that I like to think about challenges, no matter what your background or spiritual beliefs or whatever, just in the interest of having a thought exercise in which to contextualize challenges. What if you knew that Earth, coming to Earth, let's just think about it as a PhD program, okay? Just like you would look up all the different schools and look at the curriculum and look at the professors and look at all the things you were going to learn, and then you choose a school based on what's going to be most challenging, what's going to most challenge you, where you're going to learn the most and get the most value for your time. So what if we considered that coming to Earth right now was our PhD program, and that we sign up for curriculum and challenges and heartache and all of the ways that we experience anything other than happiness, joy, and abundance as how, like, if I knew that I chose this, if I knew that I'm experiencing exactly this, exactly in this way, in order to learn something, in order to grow, in order to evolve personally, how could I view this differently? So even just as a thought exercise, that is something that has absolutely changed my world. There was a situation pretty recently. So you know, again, this is a lifetime journey, I think, to reconcile with this. Very recently, I was so triggered by something that was happening to someone very, very close to me. And, you know, face value, superficially, this person was one of the most evil, vindictive, awful people ever. And I was definitely in the why. How could she do this to this person? How, in what frame of mind would anyone think that this was ever an acceptable human behavior? You know, I was very much in my pain body, very much in like the perpetuation of why. And it took me a while because I was very, very triggered, and I could not see straight for several weeks. Like I was upside down. And then I chose to apply this frame, and I chose to, because I could not deal with it superficially. So I had to go way meta here and say to myself, if I knew that I chose to be a participant, to be the recipient of this exact person in this exact scenario and this exact behavior, how could I think about this differently? And what I came up with was, and it's almost like I had to make up a story in my mind in order to get my face above the water enough to breathe. You know, it's like the story was my buoy so that I could get some perspective. And I made up a story about that I've curated my life beautifully. Like I am in a perpetual state of bliss. I have incredible relationships in my life because I've eliminated or moved away from anything resembling toxicity. I have cultivated a practice where I just create what I want and I eliminate anything that doesn't serve me. And so I applied that to this situation, and it occurred to me, wow, I don't think I came here to just coast and be comfortable. All of the biggest jumps I've made in my success and my abundance and in how I feel about myself and how I feel in my world have been as a result of times where I've had to make a shift. You know, I've been so uncomfortable that I had to make a shift. And so I was like, maybe on some level, I made a deal with this person subconsciously to be like, oh, I see you're really fucking comfortable in your life right now. And I'm going to come in and shake your world up so that you can level up. You're welcome, you know? And that's exactly what happened? I was so triggered that I had to walk that path between being completely upset to finding my center. And then something would happen in the next 5 minutes that I would just be out of my mind again. And then I would have to find my center. And it was taking months at first, and then it was taking weeks, and then it was taking days. And now something happens. It's not about not ever being triggered, right? It's not about not ever getting upset. It's not about like being so desensitized of the world that you're not affected by anything ever. I think, at least this is where I am in my journey, it's acknowledging that, yes, I'm going to get pissed. Like, yes, it's going to be hard. And I think it's supposed to be, you know, because walking that path back and forth between being really upset and being centered and peaceful. You know, at first I was going down there with a machete through the grasslands. And then the next time I was walking the path, it was a little easier because it was already kind of patted down. And then the next time it was a little easier. And now it's like I'm ice skating back and forth. And it's just that easy, you know? Like the Zen masters, they walk. They're always walking. That's why everything in that realm of personal development is called a practice, because it's never, you've never arrived, you know, which is the point. It's the point to practice.
So true. Yeah. And I feel like it's the universe. What you said, I just resonate with so much. It's the universe testing you to see if you're ready for the next level.
Yes.
Because when things are going great, you're like, I'm cushy, I'm coasting, like, I got this, but you're also not growing. You're just staying on the same level. So I used to feel like when something bad happened, I'm like, why is this happening to me? And like, everything was going so great. Everything was going so well. And then boom, this happened. And now I'm like, wow, the universe is going, I'm ready for this next level. Oh yeah, bring it on. Like, let's go. Like, okay. And all I have to do is pass the test. And I have to the quicker I pass it, the quicker I can get through that shit. And then quicker I can go to the next level. But without like and you have to take responsibility too. You're like, you take 100% responsibility with zero excuses. And you know that it's happening for you, not to you. And in a good way. It's like a reverse compliment. It's like a backhanded compliment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's really easy, you know, if you're stuck in victim mentality about, you know, why is this happening to me? You know, it's you know, when we're in that place, it's really hard to grow. It's really hard to gain a perspective. I was recently, Elizabeth Gilbert came to Nashville where I live to speak about her new book. And it's not something like, that's not something I would be like, oh my gosh, she's coming to town, I'm going to go. But a friend invited me. I was like, sure, I'll go. And she said this thing that I just thought of when you said that. She said, you know, as we move through challenges, the first thing that happens when like event happens, like hard event happens, you say, why is this happening to me? And then you move into personal responsibility and you get curious and you say, why is this happening to me? This is interesting. Why is this happening to me? And then you've arrived at this little destination within the greater context of the journey when you can say, why is this happening to me? Wow. You know?
I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky that this is happening to me. Thank you.
Yes. And I can genuinely say that about this situation that happened that I thought I would never be able to get over. And now I'm like, wow, I would not be where I am right now in my journey and in my perspective and in my capacity and my gravity. Like I've got some serious gravitas from moving through that right now, you know? And I owe it all to this person.
Who you now love.
You know? Who I now love, genuinely.
Thank
and like
you.
what exactly, and what a weight off our shoulders, you know, like being angry or you know, holding resentment towards something or someone. I love that saying is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to feel pain. You know, it only hurts us. So as fast as you can let it go. No, oh no, they're good. they're off. gallivanting, probably not even thinking about you at all, you know, and like, you're the one over here drinking the poison, being like, you know? So yeah.
That's so true.
That's how we deal with challenges.
Exactly. And that then when you go through these next stages, it then talks about the importance of like creation and, you know, not being too afraid to create your own self. And talk to me about that, because I feel like we're just touching on that, because each time that you pass this new challenge or this new wave and this new test that the universe is giving you, you are evolving and you do change. So how do you work with people who are, maybe a lot of people, maybe the female's doing the personal development or the male, and then they're in a relationship and the other person's not doing it? Like, how do you move up together when you start to create? Because you talk about creating yourself again, but what happens to that, the spouse or the partner or the friends?
Yeah, that's a hard one. This comes up a lot, actually, especially with my coaching clients, because they're they are just running. They are going for it, creating new versions of themselves every week, every day, every minute even. And it can feel like at times that you're leaving behind the people closest to you if they're not doing the work as consistently or as vigorously. And I've been in this position too. And the way that I like to come into this conversation, it's because you don't want to slow down. You don't want to have an anchor holding you back in the version of a person who doesn't get it. But I do believe that this work lightens us and allows us to even from a physical perspective, and this is actually physics, this is actually quantum physics, it's vibration. Like, we all have a vibrational frequency. We actually do have an electromagnetic frequency that is emanating from our bodies all the time. And it's proven that certain emotional states are higher vibration, like joy, bliss, gratitude, all these things, and certain emotional states like apathy, anger, those weigh us down. So in the context of the human experience, if you're someone that's doing your work and moving through these things, you're going to have a higher ratio of those higher vibration emotions. And it's more about doing your work to maintain that state, kind of like how we were seeing the challenges when we were talking about that earlier, not being affected by someone else's projection or story. And then just keeping that practice, keeping that vibration up. And in my experience, they can't help but join you, you know, it's going to be one of two things. They're either gonna rise and join you and be engaged because they're going to witness the magic that is your life, or it's going to fall away, and it's going to feel great when it does. It's going to feel perfect. And I think being in trust of that, and I know it's hard because we have a lot of attachments to the way we think things should go, particularly if it's a longer term friendship or romantic relationship. But yeah, I think stepping into the fearlessness around not being afraid to iterate to different versions of ourselves, and not trying so hard to adhere to something that I said I would do 10 years ago. Because 10 years ago, Christine has no idea who this Christine is. You know, how could I have known? So almost like moving into a place where I'm okay with defining integrity by saying, I am doing my work. I'm changing at every minute of my life, which, you know, we're supposed to. We're not supposed to stay the same version of ourselves for decades on end. And yeah, moving into a place where if I know that I am making a decision and speaking a truth from what I know to be true to the best of my ability today, that's the best place that I can be at, not only for myself, but for everyone that I love and who loves me.
Mm-hmm. And it's like standing in alignment with what you are. Like, you can't really drag people up. You can show them the way, yeah. But I was in a relationship 5 years ago, and I was starting to do personal development, and I was starting to grow, and he didn't want to do any of it. And so at that point, you're like, well, I can't even work with that. I mean, like, if someone's willing to grow, then fine. But if they're literally saying, like, this is not what I want, I feel like that's the time where you need to say, okay, well, you're not what I want. Because if you don't have someone wanting to grow, it's going to be very challenging for you and difficult for you to grow to your full potential with somebody else who's not even willing to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Lastly, I wanted to ask you, a lot of the people that, that watch this or listen to this podcast, they're creating a new business. Maybe it's in network marketing, or they've just got their new business going. And how do you differentiate knowing when you're treating something like a hobby and then actually making and doing it as a business? Because a lot of people maybe come into something and they're not attaching the money to the work so much. And so they're just kind of going through the motions. Like, it's a hobby, but they want to make it a business, or they think they're doing it as a business, but actually it's a hobby. So how can you tell in your head when you know that you're actually doing this as a business rather than just doing something as a hobby?
That's a good question. My mind immediately goes to the notion that what you put your energy into expands. And I would also measure how I was interacting with something in terms of whether it's just a hobby or whether it's something which is a business, and the way I'm hearing that is a hobby you spend less time on and just kind of like when it's convenient. Whereas a business, it's where you're going to focus the majority of your effort and time. And I would look for a sign of my alignment. So when I know I'm in alignment, it's like everything feels effortless almost. I have this unbridled joy. I have an exhilaration. Time disappears. And when I am in that state, I perpetuate whatever that activity is and try and fill as many of my minutes with that. So I would say if you're feeling that about your hobby, allow yourself the time flexibility to do it more. Follow that alignment, follow that intuition, and cultivate a willingness to trust yourself. Because if you are feeling that feeling of alignment and it's just a hobby and you're in a situation, it's like, oh, well, I can't quit my job if I'm really gonna, at what point do I quit? Because I need to have this be supporting me, blah, blah, blah. I think that there's a moment that you just have to, if you're feeling that alignment, you have to trust yourself, trust your capacity to create what you want and make the leap. And it's in making the leap. And in that moment of not having necessarily a base of security that you've known, it's then that you will step up in a way that you might not if you do have a cushion to fall on, because you have no other choice.
I love that. I think you hit the nail on the head where you said a hobby is when you're just doing it when it's convenient. Mm-hmm. And a business, you're doing it regardless. Like, you're doing it when it's really inconvenient. Like when you're like the last thing I want to do right now, but you're doing it anyway. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. I love that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. That was so fun, so much value, so many takeaways, so many points. Where can they find you to hear more about you and follow you on all your social medias?
All my social medias are Christine ONL. I'm the only Christine ONL in the whole world. So there's that. Very helpful. No SEO needed. And my website is onl.com. WENELL.com. Yeah.
I love it. We're going to put all of your handles, everything in the links below. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Make sure that you leave us a 5-star review. It Takes Grit podcast as well. Let us know who else you want us to have on the show. Thank you so much, Christine. And
you're welcome.
On the next episode. Bye.